get started, sir?
Yes, please.
Good afternoon, everybody, or good evening, everybody. And it's indeed a unique experience after COVID, almost 2 years, to be giving this talk in person. And it's hybrid, so we have people online. So I will try to keep it as simple as possible, and we are right on time. So you must be wondering, why is an endocrinologist here talking to you about nutritional therapies? Because I truly believe that lifestyle management is going to be the cornerstone for weight management. I have no financial disclosures for this talk, and in the next 15 to 20 minutes, I will speak to you about what is the role of medical nutrition therapy, macronutrients, eating patterns and meal planning, and how can you apply this in a practical manner as a very busy clinician to take care of your patients with obesity and prediabetes and diabetes. So this made the headlines just recently in Times of India that 1 in 5 in India is obese or overweight. Isn't that startling? And definitely the remaining are pre-obese or pre-diabetic is what we can try to assume. Now, why is this important? I thought I would just spend 1 or 2 slides on this, because we are well aware that as the BMI rises, you can see that from BMI 25 to 30, and when you start crossing that, your risk of diabetes, hypertension exponentially increases. Now, what we also know, not just from Caucasian data, as you can see in the blue panel, that weight gain or obesity is the main driver of type 2 diabetes, and we are in a diabetic conference, of course. And what you see over here is, look at this cutoff. At a BMI of 25, this is fine, but as soon as your BMI starts to go about 27, you can see how this risk exponentially doubles. At the same time, it was also seen by our very own Dr. Ramachandran's study that when you become obese, the diabetes risk also increases alongside with it. So obesity certainly is the main driver of type 2 diabetes. And as would make sense, if you lose weight, you will reverse all of these risk factors. And that's why it's important to understand about weight management. So I've just proven to you as to why we need to understand this. Now, what we also know from the NIH data is that we simply use BMI very often to define obesity. And these numbers are slightly lower for the Asian population. So you need to take off about 2.5 kilogram per meter square for each BMI cutoff. But Dr. Yagnik has shown us in his YY paradox that it's not just about BMI, but we need to really worry about body fat. What we know is that for the same BMI, you can see the European gentleman is 22.3 and the Indian gentleman is 22.3 BMI. But the body fat is 9% versus a whopping double of 20%. So what we need to focus on is not simply weight loss, but also measuring body composition and working on fat loss. The reason is the minute you have more fat, you become metabolically very active. You have the inflammatory pathway triggered off. I'm not going to talk completely about the obese pathophysiology because that's not my topic today, but just to know why we are doing this. You trigger something that we call the insulin resistance syndrome, wherein there is a common soil hypothesis, which not only triggers diabetes, but also cardiometabolic risk factors. And these are 3 of the 5 factors of abdominal obesity, a high triglyceride, a low HDL cholesterol, a high blood pressure, and a high fasting glucose. These very easily something you could do in your outpatient clinical practice. So waist circumference has been shown by Dr. V. Mohan's study that is a very good surrogate markers for Indians. And therefore now we move along to how can you work on this. I have proven to you that certainly we need to address weight. We need to assess whether the patient is obese, overweight, and more importantly, does he fit criteria for metabolic syndrome? So the patient, of course, is confused because there's a plethora of information out there. What should I eat? What works? Is it simply reducing calories? Or do I need to take a certain amount of carbohydrate, protein, fat? I read somewhere in the news I need to increase my dietary fiber intake. So all of this is what the patient presents to you with. And how are you going to address this simply when you already have to give him medications for his blood pressure, cholesterol, so many other things? Simply put, yes, caloric restriction always works. We have seen this for the longest time, that it's all about balance, energy homeostasis. So you need to have a good caloric balance, and that will work in the short term, but also in the long term to maintain weight. We really wish weight maintenance was something as simple as just switching from a big Gujarati thali that maybe some of you had last night and a lot of us have every day. especially during the Diwali holidays. We are right here after Diwali. And how can you convince your patient to replace one meal like this? So this is something very difficult, and therefore we need to scratch our heads and be very creative in our practice as to how can we guide our patients. Because truly speaking, should he do a keto diet? Is there a fat diet that's dangerous? What does the patient resort to? In order to guide our patients better, we need to understand what are macronutrients. So I simply put out the plate method, which has become universally popular in most of the countries. Not just the US food plate, but we also have the Indian food plate. As you will notice that we are predominantly carbohydrate eaters. So there is nothing wrong with that. I am not asking you to tell your patients to stop carbs, even though I'm going to show you a lot of data that low carbohydrate diets are very good, but there is also a lot of understanding that goes on is you need to stop eating packaged foods, processed foods, for example, chips and sodas, and switching to carbohydrates that are healthy. So all our millets, grains, bajra, jawar, ragi, all the grains indigenous to us are all carbs, but they are all fine. What you need to do is portion control, of course. So we'll talk a little bit more about these. So carbohydrates, you can actually give your patients anywhere from 3 to 4 servings per day of healthy carbohydrates, such as fruits, vegetables, pulses, and whole grains. You need to start understanding what may spike sugar levels less, known as low glycemic index or low glucose load foods for the patients. Instead of giving them straight sugars or mithai or desserts, you need to stay away from that. Fat is not the enemy. I often give a talk which I've labeled as fat is not the enemy, because you need to have healthy fats in your diet, but you need to limit saturated fats. You need to limit trans fats, which are in chips and again in sodas and packaged foods. Protein has been shown across the board in obese, overweight, diabetics or non-diabetics to help in losing weight and also in improving overall metabolic status. Now, of course, do not neglect the micronutrients such as chromium, magnesium, all your multivitamins, iron, B12, D3, because these will work at the level of your, as a coenzyme in most of your biochemical pathways in making ATP, and this is where you need to boil down to the final common pathway. So, as we will understand macronutrients, you will also understand that we start off with vegetables and grains, and we tell our patients that try to avoid starchy vegetables, go for the non-starchy vegetables, try to avoid white grains and try to go for whole intact grains. So simple, I just put this here because these are available to you commercially if you want your patients while they are sitting, waiting for you in the waiting area to look at these cards and simple things they can understand. I can give you the resources later on. Second part of the story for us to understand. Once we understand nutrients, then we start understanding what goes into what is a carbohydrate. For example, breads, roti, pasta, rice are all carbohydrates. Your meat and eggs are all your protein sources. And then you have oils and nuts, which are all your fat sources, your good fat sources. Once you understand this, you will start developing a food pattern. For example, the Mediterranean pattern, which is a high-fat, moderate carbohydrate diet. But something similar to that is we need to understand the Indian pattern, which is a moderate carb diet, and how can we incorporate healthy carbs in that. So now let's go ahead and look at a meta-analysis, which looks at different dietary patterns. Next, I will try to show you how can we switch when we eat carbs first or at the end. And then lastly, I'll have a word on intermittent fasting. And that's all the 15 minutes will sort of allow me to do today. So in this particular meta-analysis, what they tried to see is, what if we reduce carbohydrate in the diet? Instead of the normal 150 to 200 grams of carbs that most of us consume, in this particular diet, the low carbohydrate was all the way down below 80 grams of carbs, versus a balanced diet, which has about 40% of carbs, 30% of protein, and 20 to 30% of fat. And they looked at this specifically for weight loss in adults over a 3 to 6 month period. So on the top over here, you can see this is low carb but high fat, not ketogenic. And then at the bottom, you had a low fat with a high protein. And these are about 8 studies in each group. And what you can see over here is that across the board, the low carbohydrate diet worked for weight loss in most of these adults. So certainly low carbohydrate diet works. And that is something we can see about 3,000 participants, 19 trials. Okay, so if low carbohydrate works, now let's look at the fat part. So in this particular trial, they took down the carbs really low. As you can see, in one of the diet, you have high fat and the carb is low as 60 grams of carbs. And the second diet, they have a low fat, but a high carb. So this is really, to your right, is very much like the Indian dietary pattern. 200 grams of carbohydrates, about 60 to 70 grams of protein, which is much lower in the Indian diet. But as you can see, the fat and the carbs match very well to our Indian diet. And what did they find? So this is again looking at, this is a meta-analysis. Moving forward, across the board, what you can see again, that most of the studies, they favored for weight loss, the low carbohydrate diet. So whether you change the fat percentage, you bring down the carb, and in this particular study, of course, the carb level was very low. You don't need to go so low. Even if you can reduce your carb intake, I tell people by about 50 grams per day. And that is simply, I say, eliminate carbs at one of the meals per day is the easiest intervention you can do for yourself without losing satiety, without losing overall satisfaction from food, okay? So what are the pros and cons of low carb versus high carb? Low carb also led to a greater improvement in A1C than high carb. But we only have data up to 6 months, not very long duration studies. Very low carb diet had a greater advantage, but not just the 100 grams of carb for HbA1c. For weight loss, both of them worked. Other benefits, it raised the HDL cholesterol, lower triglyceride, you are able to come off diabetes medications if you were taking any. Now, of course, these are my personal cons for very low carbohydrate diet. Should not be done without supervision. There are no long-term studies with hard clinical endpoints. We don't know how it works if your patient has underlying CKD, pregnant women. The kind of fat the prescribing physician gives. So if you're not supervising and just tell them, we are not asking you to eat butter, margarine, bad oils. So high saturated fat versions of low carb diet, and that's when we hear the myth that ketogenic diet killed somebody or a high fat diet killed. So this has to be done under supervision, and always medication adjustments will be needed if you're going to prescribe these diets to your patients. Okay, so moving forward, now these are some of the diets that you've always heard about. So I've spoken to you about macronutrient balancing. We have heard about the DASH diet, which had less than 3 grams per day sodium. It was developed for blood pressure. We have the Atkins diet, which was a low carbohydrate, but with a very high amount of protein. Then we also have low fat, and we have the very, very popular Mediterranean diet, which looks at good fat, increasing the amount of good fat in your diet, which has really gained popularity for reversing or benefits in cardiovascular disease. Now, what we find is that most of the diets worked for weight loss. What we also find, so here in the blue, we have Atkins, here we have the Zone, the Weight Watchers, and the Ornish diet. What we find is that though they had weight loss, if the patient stays on the diet, it's sort of like a medication, then you continue to have the weight loss. The minute they stop this or they do not adhere, therefore lifestyle change should be not looked upon. We should stop calling it a diet. We need to start calling it a lifestyle change, because it's not something that you have to do for a short term. You need to maintain it in the long term also. So this is a very, very interesting study from the New England Journal of Medicine now, because we have just spoken about Mediterranean. So now let's look at low fat, which is where everything really started from the Women's Health Initiative. This is the DIRECT trial, which is not the DIRECT trial that was done for diabetes remission, but this is the dietary intervention randomized control trial, wherein about 322 overweight or obese adults, mainly men, they were randomized to receive either a low fat, a Mediterranean, or a low carbohydrate diet. And you can see over here the fat limit is given. And what do we find in this particular study again? This is the weight change over 2 years. These patients stayed on the diet for about 2 years. So in the purple color over here, you have the low carbohydrate diet. And you can see the highest weight loss is again seen with the low fat diet, low carbohydrate diet. Now, what about the Mediterranean diet, which is a high fat diet? Again, they lost weight and it was very well maintained. But look at the low fat diet. You do not have similar benefits with the low fat diet. So again, the p-value is statistically significant, and you do very well if you are staying on the low carb or the Mediterranean diet. So this is very important to note for us. Something similar was seen in the Predimed study, since we are here talking about diabetes. In this particular study, which again looked at the Mediterranean diet in subjects who did not yet have diabetes, and all they were given is 3,500 patients given extra virgin olive oil or mixed nuts 30 grams per day, And you can see that versus the control in the this is the nuts group and this is the extra virgin olive oil group. They had a very good, you can look at the hazard ratio over here. You do very well, almost a 30, there's almost a 31% reduction with the extra virgin olive oil and almost a 19% reduction with the nuts in progressing from pre-diabetes to diabetes. So good fats can make such a huge difference. You do not need to shy away from them. So just summarizing all the various eating patterns available to us and trying to assess them, not as simply, as I told you, why are we trying to lose weight? Because it's thick and thinly associated with metabolic syndrome. So does this have a reduced risk of diabetes, A1C reduction, less cardio? So we've got all the parameters over here. So you can see the Mediterranean checks off for quite a few of this. You can see there's also the vegan diet wherein there is no animal source of anything. And again, that works for diabetes, A1C reduction and weight loss, as well as lowering blood pressure. The low-fat diet really worked truly well for diabetes and this. So I just wanted to kind of show you that the weight loss is seen with most of the diets. So if you can follow some sort of a dietary pattern, it will work. Now, A1C reduction, however, the best diet for that are still the low carb and the very low carb diet. And this is what I want to point out over here is you need to customize for your patient when you start selecting food groups, dietary patterns, and stick with their cultural background as they want to do. Emphasize non-starchy vegetables, minimize sugar, refined grains. So this is the bottom line. Choose whole foods over highly processed foods and reduce overall carbohydrate intake has demonstrated the most important evidence for glycemia. And of course, we know very well from the direct trial that in our patients with type 2 diabetes, if they lost more than 15 kilograms of weight, they had an 86% chance of diabetes remission. So does it matter, just switching gears now as to food order planning, does it matter what you eat first? In this particular study, Dr. Osama Hamdi's group has also looked at a lot of these studies. Dr. Shukla actually used to be with them, so I'm just showing you a smaller study which is easier to understand. Herein, what they did is they took 16 subjects with type 2 diabetes and they had the same meal on 3 days in random order. So either they took the carbohydrate first, or they took the carbohydrate last, or they took all components together as a sandwich and juice. And the blood was sampled for glucose, insulin, GLP-1 and glucagon measurements at baseline and up to 180 minutes. So let's see what we find. So here is wherein they took the carbohydrate first, so bread and the orange juice. Then they had a break and took the salad and the chicken. In the second time when they ate, they took the carbohydrates last. And here, like I said, they made a sandwich and they had half and half before and after. Now what happens? The yellow is when you have the carbohydrates first, your sugar level immediately spikes up. It stays high and it stays high at the end of even 180 minutes. Because the sugar spikes up, the insulin level starts to spike up and you can see how it stays. Now, whenever you took the carbohydrate last, this is the blue group. That's why start with a salad, start with fiber, start with anything that will help you to push back your glycemia. You can see this is the blue is where they ate the carbohydrate last. The sugar level does not, this is very visible to all of us. The blue line shows you how this is a nice, not a very high spike in sugar. Hence, your insulin does not spike up so much. And the GLP levels are the best whenever you're using carbohydrate last. So this is the approach you can also try and suggest to your patient that they need to avoid, or start your lunch with a kheera kakdi tomato salad, start your dinner with a bowl of soup. That's what we sort of have used in our practice as well, okay? The magic bullet is intermittent fasting. So this is the last 2 minutes of my talk because I thought we can't just talk about food groups but also have to mention about how to use this. So intermittent fasting and why has it gained so much popularity? Not just because it causes weight loss, possible diabetes reversal, cancer prevention, reduction of inflammation, anti-aging, improved brain activity, so many things. And we also know of famous stars who've been using this. This is Tim Dorsey, who's the CEO of Twitter, and he has been doing this for the longest time. He simply eats 1 meal a day forever. And every couple of months, he does not eat for a whole week. So he does this really prolonged fasting. The most popular fasting patterns, however, are either an alternate day fasting or a 5-2 fast, which is a 2-day fast or very low calorie consumption 2 days a week, or a time restricted fasting, which is probably the most popular, known as the 16-8 method, wherein most of our patients will eat in 8 hours, and during the remaining 16 hours, we only allow them to have anything that does not cause insulin release, such as clear water, lemon water, sometimes green tea, black coffee. We try to even limit that as much as possible, however. And so they will usually, in India, what works is from 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. And what it showed in this particular study, I think my time is up, so let me finish and you can ask me in the question answer. Is that? Oh, sure, okay. Okay. So in this, yeah, that's right, this is just my last slide. So in this particular study, when patients did this alternate day fasting for weight loss, what we found is that it worked really well and they had a good loss of fat mass. So I'll just stop over here and I'll add a new twist to what I already showed you, that all of this works, not just calorie restriction, macronutrient composition based on your patient, but also using what we call metabolic switching, therefore adjusting or changing the macronutrient composition and using a time-restricted feeding. So thank you very much for your attention. I've just put together all the guidelines in one page.
Thank you very much.